What's up, everybody? Welcome aboard to Bubba's Bottom Line, and always great to be here. Welcome back. Hope everybody had a great weekend, and hope you had a great 4th of July weekend as well. And here we are after a short or shortened holiday week, and we're now off to the races. And as we look forward ahead to this week, not a lot of economic data to really look at, so it'll be more what are the markets going to do. And of course, typically this is a very slow time of the year, but over the last couple of summers, it hasn't been quite as slow. In fact, a lot of the action has happened over the summer. But if we look back at last week, it was basically a big nothing. There was not a lot of action. There was some up and down movement, but when it all came to the end, we ended up with basically a fairly flat market. I think a couple of key things that we saw happen were the markets where the NASDAQ is still under siege and still under in some pretty heavy concern here. I think tech is pretty much under trouble. And I think when you look at some of the things that happened, we had a couple of, they'll call them the fat finger trades. I call that BS, or as they say, what a crock. A fat finger trade could be almost possible, but most systems are set up not to allow those to happen, number one. Number two, that's the new term in saying we made a bad trade, so we'll call it a fat finger trade to blame it on something else other than that we just screwed up and we couldn't steal any more money, so we got caught here. And I think that we saw that happen in gold twice and in silver twice. Now, interesting, silver had one on its own on Thursday night at about 7 o'clock Eastern time when there's no volume. So you always wonder why those things happen and when they happen. And it's interesting if you look at the timing, because the fat finger trades were into a market that had no liquidity, that had no volume, and there's no way that any smart person would be selling into those unless they were being into what we would call forced liquidation. So, and that happens all the time. And of course, that is typically a sign. But when we look at the gold and silver markets, they are certainly under some extreme concern here, a little bit under siege. I think that if gold can't hold this 1,200 level, it could be pretty ugly for a while. Silver is now breaking down again. But all in all, I think these are probably buying opportunities. I think that there's a lot of things you're seeing that don't make a lot of sense. And I think part of this is being manipulated lower because you're seeing some deals done with options and things like that, which are having these options expire worthless. Then they'll pick the prices back up. But there's also, I think, somebody trying to push down the markets so that they can get a hold of some physical, because a lot of this is being taken care of in what we call the paper gold, paper silver. So it is an issue to watch for. But again, this goes more in line with a lot of the manipulation that's going on in the markets right now. This is not, necessarily a true and free market. And I think you're seeing a big push for other reasons. And I would certainly be, in my opinion, be looking at potential buying here as an investment, not as a trade. I might look at being for both. But I think that you could, if you've never bought gold or silver, or you're looking to add on, I think you could certainly put a little bit in here, knowing that A, you could have to buy it lower and continue average down, or B, that it would go higher and you'd look to buy some more higher. But again, I think that you've got too many things that are not real being dealt with in these markets right now, and that's of course when you destruct the free market system. We look back and of course we had the jobs number, and the jobs number was a crock as well. Now, again, why do I say that, and why am I not excited about 222,000 jobs? Well, it's a very simple process as to why I'm not excited. The jobs that they created were not good. The growth in wages was marginally, not worth talking about. In the meantime, when you talk about, the Fed wanting to create inflation, okay, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the cost in goods and services more expensive, but we're not seeing it in the wage growth but yet we don't have inflation. It's like a real, it kind of boggles your mind. This is like a real brain teaser. But of course, we know that the Fed and the people that are trying to manipulate the market have no brains, and they have no understanding of the free market system. They know what they can put in a book. But so we look at these jobs, and you hear everybody raving about, oh my God, we're at full employment. It's great. Oh, we're going to the moon. Everything is terrific. Well, let's just take a look at one key simple factor. Maybe two, maybe three. We have no growth. All right. So when we look at corporate earnings, and everybody on TV, all the pundits, all the brokers, everybody's talking about, oh, this is the greatest growth, blah, blah, blah. Look, okay, if you're not getting more production, if you're not creating more goods, if you're growing because A, you're cutting back the amount of workers, if you're cutting down a bunch of your spending, and you're bringing in more capital, your earnings are going to look great. But what does your future look like? Because you're not growing the company. So I believe what we're being once again sucked in to believe that this is real growth. This is not growth. This is money. All right. Now, unfortunately, the middle class does not get to benefit from this money. All right. This goes right into the bottom line of the wealthy. This goes right into the bottom line of the coffers of the companies, not helping the little guy. And how can we look at it that way? Well, let's look at the key factor that's out there right now. All right. The key factor is simply this. The tax receipts, the money that's being paid in to the government for taxes continues to decline. If that is the case, that means that people are making less money because they're paying less taxes. It's a very simple formula, but nobody mentions the fact that we're paying less taxes. Everybody talks about the great earnings growth. So we've seen a market lifted artificially on really phony growth that does not work on other things that everybody else works on. And until we find a way to grow, until we find a way to bring in more production, until we find a way to create better jobs that are going to help the average American get back to work, we are not going to see any real growth, which would mean that it will keep a bulk of the population in still a recession. Now, I've talked about this recession for months, maybe years. Okay. When they said we came out, I said, BS, there's no way we're out of this recession. And of course, now all of a sudden hitting the news stories is, well, a lot of the states have not participated, which has been our contention the entire time, that most states have not participated. Most people have not participated. Yes, if you live in Los Angeles, if you live in New York, yeah, the big money always succeeds because, again, these are the times when they succeed even more. So you can look there, but as you come into the middle of the country, as you start leaving the action centers, as you start leaving where all the wealthy are, all of a sudden you find out that there is no growth, jobs suck, and people themselves are not working and they're not striving through this. And of course, the numbers are now starting to bear that out, that a lot of states have not even reached the pre-recession areas where they were. So are we going to really sit here and try to have people believe that we are actually seeing some true good things happening? And I'm going to say no. I'm saying that this is so much artificial that at the end of the day, okay, it can only lead to a market correction. Now, again, we're not looking for a market collapse. It's not, again, I don't buy into that stuff where everybody wants to tell you that the world's coming to an end. The world's not coming to an end. They're going to figure it out. But again, it has to be figured out when it allows the free markets to trade. I had on the Bubba show last week, I had Danielle DiMartino Booth, who used to work for the Fed. And we went through a lot of these very topics. And you can see from her now, she's, first of all, extremely bright. And she worked for the Fed, but she also worked on Wall Street. So she gets the entire picture of what's going on. And she is explaining on the show, and as I've said here many, many times, is the amount of debt that we create we can't service that debt. And the real problem is that the debt that's being created is being created at rates that will not persist either. We're going to see rates are going to have to rise, and they will rise on their own. And the real problem, because the Fed has not allowed the markets to rise and to trade freely, the real problem is going to come with the rates will one time start to spike up, because all of a sudden there's going to be a problem. And you're going to see many of these places that have borrowed all this money. You're going to see a lot of defaults because people aren't going to be able to pay because they're not making enough money. So what you've seen here is a consumer confidence that is kind of assumed that things are going to be all right, because they continue to believe that, well, the Fed or the government's going to bail us out and make it all better again. But all they've really done is they've kicked the can down the road, because they're begging to get that inflation in so they can raise more taxes. But if you look at the picture from the whole, it really states that we have a major problem brewing in here, and that it's going to create a crack before it creates real, boomtown, a real growth-oriented situation. It's been no different than it was in 1929. Any major market collapse has been driven by the same thing: stupidity. The inability to let the markets decide what asset classes are worth. The inability to let everything work naturally. The inability to let the system flush itself, because the best way to get real growth and real new business is to let the system fail if it's going to fail. Now, it is not a guarantee that it would fail, but when you try to prop it up, when you continue to put a Band-Aid where a tourniquet is needed, when you continue to pretend that it does not exist, you end up with a major, major problem, which will then be nasty. And of course, the poor retirees, the poor middle class, the unsuspecting investors will once again get hammered, while the big guys take all the money away and just continue to put it in their coffers. And that is just another act of creating the socialistic environment that you're now seeing that are trying to be created by the left at this particular time. But I'm not so sure that, again, I don't blame either side. I think both sides suck. I think that they have one agenda, and it isn't you and me. Their agenda is them and how they can abscond with the most amount of capital and cash to stick it to us. But we're going to come back. We're going to stop out here for a break. This is Bubba's Bottom Line, real markets, real people. And of course, again, the Bubba Show every day, 2 to 3 on libertytalk.fm. And of course, Danielle DiMartino Booth from the Fed and the author of Fed Up is in last week, now Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. You can go check out those interviews if you'd like to. In the meantime, I'm going to step out here for a break. I'll be right back. This is Bubba's Bottom Line, coming back to you after the break. Welcome back to the Bubba Show, or Bubba's Bottom Line. Could be the Bubba Show, but Bubba's Bottom Line, real markets, real people. And of course, we've got a lot of things going on, and we've talked about the false in earnings. We've talked about all of the garbage that we continue to get taken to us. In the meantime, have we noticed that from a technical standpoint, many of the charts are starting to break down? Have we noticed that the big FANG stocks are not quite as exciting as they were, and they're now on edge of going the other way? Have we noticed that that we still don't have good jobs, right? So where is it going to come from? And I think the biggest problem is, as we come into this week, you've got bank earnings on Friday starting, with the big banks. Now, what are their earnings going to be like? I'm sure they'll show fine. But again, I contend that the banking system is flawed, that because they have the ability to create their own money, because they have the backing of the Fed, that they can go ahead and continue to make bad loans. And really what you're seeing happening is that the banks take the money, make big money, take it away, pick it out of the system, and show great profits, continue to pump money in, again, creating what we believe, or what I believe, is a legalized Ponzi scheme throughout it all. And of course, you couldn't have it, it couldn't develop unless you had the money printers behind the whole system being willing to pump it up. But I think you're seeing trouble in banks around the globe, which we continue to ignore. China is going to have some major problems, but again, we continue to ignore. We've already seen Italy. We've seen many others, and we don't see them talking. Of course, we do get these great reports from the stress tests, but what is the real stress test, and what are the real numbers? My contention still believes and is that they do not have enough to back it up. And when the meltdown comes, it'll be the same old story. And of course, they'll be looking at you and me to once again bail them out. Because as we come towards this debt ceiling that they're going to raise, there's no question they're going to raise. Now, we know that when they raise it, there's always going to be something attached to that raise. And you know what that means, right? That means that the middle class, once again, get it stuck. Or the sun don't shine, all right, with no choice, but with a Democrat and a Republican smiling at you, telling you, we did it for you. That's right. You did it for me. You once again took money out of my back pocket. You took away my advantage of trying to live better because you guys want to abscond with all the capital. And that's where I think you have. I think that the whole system is flawed. And I think that if you think that healthcare is going to get done, I think you can think again. I think this is the big charge to get single payer. I think this is the big charge to destruct. This goes back into, if you've ever read or heard about the Creature from Jekyll Island, the whole move to eliminate the middle class and take away their cash. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. It looks like they're giving no advantage to the average guy. If you look at the entrepreneurship is down, right? Because they can't get money. So when you look at the picture, and if you want to look at it in reality, you look at it that this is exactly what's happening. There is no reason to believe that they're actually trying to do something, because if the government was really trying to make things better, then they would do it. It isn't that difficult. It shouldn't be that much of a challenge to clean up the system. But when your intentions are not pure, when your intentions are really to worry about yourself and your big supporters, that becomes the bigger problem. That's why when you look at the whole model, it becomes a much bigger problem. And I think this is where you're going to see a lot of troubles in retirement with people trying to retire. I think that the Ponzi scheme of Social Security, which I believe will collapse, along with many of the other pensions, I want to know what everybody thinks they're going to do then. And I think that this is something that you have to really look at. I think you need to take a much closer look at what you're looking at, because the balance sheets that you're looking at are fluff. The balance sheets that you're looking at are built on artificial information, because, again, you're not seeing a true free market. You're seeing a market that is controlled and designed to show this phony artificial growth that does not exist. When you look at your neighbor, when you look around, and again, if you're from even places in New York, but if you're from anywhere else, Illinois, broke. Now, listen, that's a story for another day, but part of it is because of what's going on. When you look at oil, when you look at the commodity markets, we have had a recent boom up in commodities, especially in the grain space. But when you look at the pricing, okay, that is where it is now, and versus the cost of everything else, something's wrong. Right? It's not correct. And when you look at the markets, something is wrong. It's not correct. They shouldn't. Now, again, markets are always right, so I'm not thinking that are going down. I do believe that the tops are in the market, but I also believe that it's been, more artificially manipulated, and I don't think that the numbers relate to reality. And of course, we know that Wall Street and Main Street have nothing in common. All right, but I think when you're seeing here is something that can only eventually pop. It is a bubble. The Fed can say it's a bubble or not. The economists can call it a bubble or not. Todd Bubba Horwitz, I'm calling it a bubble because I'm seen this before, and I see how they tried to defer and push and get away from it. And of course, all that does is bring down debt on another generation. Well, guess what? Without working, this is going to have to, as they say, something's got to give. And I think this is going to give. And unfortunately, I think it's going to give in a big way. And I do believe that it's going to be very harmful and detrimental to a lot of our people that are fixed incomers that need this. And because of the entire mess that they've created, again, I'm not looking for the end of the world. I'm looking for a pretty serious correction. But a serious correction can create a lot of havoc, especially if you've been building into this, and especially because you believe what they may be telling you that this time may be different. It is not different. The markets don't change. Emotion drives the market. Whatever, you can look at anything you want to say. Emotions drive finances. Emotions drive things that we do. When we feel good, we go ahead and maybe step out a little bit. When we don't feel good, we go into a shell. In the meantime, it means that we've got too much debt, which we have way too much debt. And the debt is not going to be serviceable, especially when interest rates go to a reasonable level and they get through it. And eventually, they're going to get forced to, because the Fed and everybody else are going to run out, and there's going to be money that's going to take over, that's going to push the Fed around. They can print till their heart's content, but you're already seeing a lot of the dissent there by looking at some of the cryptocurrency and some of the other things that are going on. This is coming to an head, and again, is it today? No, I don't know. It could be any day. It could be tomorrow. It could be next week. It could be next month. It could be next year. There's no way to know when this will all come to fruition, but I will say this: it will, and it will be very nasty. Again, but just make sure that you protect yourself and make sure that you're hedged and ready to go, and you've locked in the things that you're trying to do. Then you won't have as much of a concern. And I think that's the other thing, is the greed element always plays out with everybody else. Anyways, we're going to step out here for a break. This is Bubba's Bottom Line, Real Markets, Real People. And we're going to come back after the break with, of course, my commentary. I don't know what I'm going to say today yet, but I'll be back in a couple of minutes to let you know what. In the meantime, Bubba's Bottom Line, Real Markets, Real People. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Bubba's Bottom Line. This is Todd Bubba Horwitz. And, I don't know. I get very frustrated. I do, obviously, my radio show every day at LibertyTalk.fm and the Bubba Show, 2 to 3 Eastern. But, I talk to a lot of people. And I talk to a lot of people throughout what I do, my trading, and then the hedging strategies that we use. And it's funny, when the markets have no volatility, it's very hard to convince people that the markets are going to eventually sell off again. It's very hard to convince people that things are not as good as we think they are. But again, people, just natural, go, well, the market's going up. I got nothing to worry about. The market's never going down again. They told me on TV that the market's never going down. I go, that broker from ABC Brokerage told me that this time is different. Well, we all know that's a bunch of... Unfortunately, I can't beat myself here, so I'd be beeping right now with the exits. I wish I could put over my head all those little exclamations. But in the meantime, all right, we have a problem. Okay, people have a problem in general, and it's we get so complacent that we go back to, well, that's the way we've always done things. Well, my question to you today is, just because that's the way we've done it, does that make it right? It's sad that we get caught in the same trap over and over and over again, because that's the way we've always done it. I talk to people, and I talk to some big people, and of course, I say, what? Here, I can show you mathematically how you can protect your wealth. And legitimately, I have a copyrighted system that does it, and these are my friends. And they go, I don't have anything to worry about. The market's not going down, so what do I have to care about? And I go, this is the same thinking that always gets us in the same trouble. But from everything we do that it really affects our daily lives, we all kind of have blinders on. And as long as we're doing well, we don't really worry about the outside. And even coming down to our voting and who we want to vote for that's the way we've always done it. Now, again, I don't care which party you are. I wish we had back to the days when everybody was more towards the center. And most people were like waiting to see what issues would push them either a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left. Because I think that's the way it should be. I think that gives you fair and equal. What we've developed now is so ridiculous. But yet, the voters, they don't vote people out. We let these idiots stay in forever. We let them steal our money forever. We let them treat us like dirt forever because that's the way we've always done it. And I think that this is a time, all right, now again, for me, listen, I'm old, okay? My life isn't going to change at this point. But I think looking forward, my kids, my grandchildren, okay, and their future generations are going to have a much bigger problem because they're going to end up in a socialism world because they're going to break everybody. And we're going to be run by a bunch of people that could care less. And that's what the concern is as you look at them chip away at the value of the dollar. Look at them chip away at everything, at all your freedoms, right? Again, everything they do is they're trying to cut away at the freedom that we have as Americans, all right? And this is not what our founding fathers fought for. So the only way we can stop that is either by having a revolution again and breaking it up again, maybe we'll call it Paul Revere, or you have to vote it. You got to vote out these imbeciles because really what needs to be done is we need to get to term limits for everybody. Politicians is not supposed to be a career, okay? It's supposed to be you serve your country, you do your best you can, you try to make it best for everybody. But all we've done is we've created a huge government that has no interest in you and me, basically. All right, they have interest in where they can pad their own pockets. And I think it's time that we get away from that's the way we've always done it and really do a little bit of research into the way to make things better. Because, again, we've seen this many, many times, and it's going to happen again. And, of course, we're depending on people that don't have a clue. Not one of those guys at the Federal Reserve understand what you do if you're in business for yourself, if you're a farmer, if you're a manufacturer, whatever it is you're doing, nobody understands what goes on there. They just know what they see in theory. And I think it's time that we need to not do it the way we've always done it, but look for better ways to do things. That'll do it for today. This is Todd Bubba Horwitz, Bubba's Bottom Line. Make sure you get the Bubba Show every single day at LibertyTalk.fm from 2 to 3 Eastern. In the meantime, everybody have a great week. I'll see you back here next time, right here on Bubba's Bottom Line. Real markets, real people. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.